Good morning, everybody. Hola and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I am Patty Delgado, the Executive Director at El Puente Institute, and I'm honored that you all are joining Patricia and I as we continue to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. At El Puente Institute, we view this month not only as a celebration of history and culture, but as an opportunity to highlight how our heritage actively fuels our leadership. And that is definitely what we're all about at El Puente. Today, our conversation is going to be a little bit different than our past 2 weeks, but it's going to be around the topic of the number one leadership skill that we're seeing is needed today in the workplace. And that is all about synergy, balance, and more importantly, cultural synergy. And so, why it's a superpower of the Latino leadership is the secret that we're going to talk to you all about today. And so, when it comes to cultural synergy, we've always talked about you don't have to choose between being effective and being authentic. You can actually be both. And we're excited to go through this LinkedIn Live with you all to give you a couple of secrets and a couple of tips as well. Hi, Patricia, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, buenos dias, Patty. Thank you for everybody for joining us today, and thank you for all of you who have been watching our recorded. So if you couldn't join us this morning, hopefully when you watch this, you'll be able to also learn a lot from us. Yeah, we're going to talk about cultural synergy. We're also looking at raíces and razón, right? The strategy
Yes.
behind that. We're going to walk you through a couple of things that we've learned from the research that we have done and what we have experienced with others. And then we're going to kind of give you some tools. One of those is our cultural drivers assessment and master classes that can hopefully help you deepen your cultural awareness.
Yes. So before we go into all of this, we do always want to give everybody an update. We launched our Cultural Drivers Profile Assessment, which is the first of its kind leadership assessment for Latinos and the Latino workforce. We launched it last week was our first week. So it's been amazing, the feedback, the input. And so we kind of want to touch base a little bit about what's been going on. And so, Patricia, I wanted us to share 2 examples and questions actually that we've gotten from individuals asking whether or not they should take the assessment. And so for everybody that is following us, that QR code on the, I don't know, however you're seeing it on the corner, is the QR code to the actual assessment. So you don't have to wait for us to guide you through the website. You can just use your phone, use that QR code, and start taking the assessment. It is free. You will get a glimpse of your results, and then you will also be able to purchase your full report. And the full report is very detailed. So I encourage you to go through that process. But let's talk about 2 examples, Patricia, that you and I have gotten. One of them was an individual whose parents are biracial, right? So his father is Latino and his mother is not Latino. And so this individual with so much heart and vulnerability asked us, can I take the Cultural Drivers Profile Assessment? And of course, the answer was yes. And so, Patricia, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about this individual and why it is, yes, we encourage those, even if you have one Latino parent, or even a situation, I know you know of somebody that was adopted by non-Latino parents, why this assessment is still very valuable for them.
Yeah. So I always talk about our Latino identity or Hispanic identity or whatever terminology we're assigned or we give ourselves. We check the box, right? So if you ever check the box, the assessment is for you because there's something that is telling you that you are a Latino, a Hispanic, Latinx, Latine. And so, but now what the assessment does is it helps you see how much does that influence you, how much does that Latinidad, that deep raíces, the roots, right, influence you. So we're moving beyond language. Not all Latinos speak English. We have the no Sabo generation. We have had language abstraction in our community. So it's not about the language. The food, next, we have all kinds of different foods. We're going to argue about it. Some of us may or may not like the food from our own home countries, and that's not what makes a Latino. Is all of those cultural scripts that you hear us talk about all the time, that El Puente Institute gives you tools and techniques to turn into cultural drivers because now you have an awareness for them. So yes, you can take it if you ever check the box. If you've ever checked the box, or if you were hesitant to check the box because perhaps you think, oh, I'm not Latino enough, and I hear that a lot. This is an opportunity for you to learn more about what does that mean, and you'll be surprised how some of these cultural norms, this behaviors, this way that we have, they have really influenced who we are, and we bring them with us. We don't put them at the table, or perhaps we are doing that, and the assessment will give you that information and say, yeah, you're minimizing that side of your identity, and that might be actually kind of what we're going to talk about today. Put you off synergy. You may not be very well
Mhm.
balanced because you might be spending too much time in trying to hide that or not leading authentically. So if you check the box or thought about checking the box, the assessment is the tool that will really help you start having that culture, that awareness.
Even if it's not even checking the box, I think it's even if you have a pool, like a soul pool for understanding your Latinidad a little bit better, this is definitely for you. Another individual also, you mentioned it right now, the no sabo. They say, you know what, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not Latino, or people have told me I'm not Latino enough. And so we also want to address those individuals. Just because you don't speak Spanish does not make you less Latino.
Yeah.
And so you are also invited as familia to take the assessment as well. There's a lot with this title of no sabo. I personally don't like that title of no sabo. I know you work at a university, Patricia, and it can really hurt somebody and their identity journey and their cultural identity journey when they're
Mhm.
called no sabo kids.
Yeah. So we purposely did the assessment in English because we were trying to capture the information. We were asked, could you do it in Spanish? And we may do a Spanish version of it after we gather all
Mhm.
this data. But one of the things I'm very conscious, aware of who is our Latino generation, who is the Latinos that are going into the workforce. 86% of Z generation Latinos are U.S. born, and about 91 to 92% of Alpha generation, which is the one that comes after, are U.S. born. Does
Mhm.
that mean they're going to give up their Spanish? No, but then probably English might be a more dominant language, or the language that they use for the place of work. And we do have to acknowledge the history of language abstraction in our community, whether it was used as a survival technique for assimilation, so you wouldn't be shamed, or what it was. I just had a young man at the university, a graduate student, that actually shared that his parents are from Colorado. His great grandparents were from Colorado, and
Mhm.
when the border crossed them, he was forced to go into white integration school. His great grandfather was, and told, you can't speak Spanish. You were punished for speaking Spanish.
Mhm.
So then
Yeah.
you have that history, generational history, that we have to allow. And I actually think when we get to keep that language, and I was lucky enough that my mother immigrating here when I was younger let me made spoke Spanish to us. It's actually, some of us are privileged that we got to keep it, because we might have
Yeah.
immigrated at a time or a place in this country where, and we know that historically in some states has also been the law at schools, no more English as a single
Right.
language. And so it's about understanding that that's not what makes us Latinos, because I sure know a lot of non-Latinos that are majoring or minoring in Spanish. And I'm
Yeah.
going to say, just the fact that you speak Spanish doesn't make you a Latino, mijo.
Right.
As Bad Bunny would say, they all want to be Latinos, but les falta sazón. So just to mention him, since
Yes,
everybody's speaking
and
fast,
love that.
yeah,
Not that we talk about Bad Bunny, just everything that he's doing. I loved every bit of it. We wrote a little bit something on LinkedIn about that. Just the cultural leadership and synergy that he's showcasing right now. So big sazon to Bad Bunny for sure.
yeah.
Thank you. So we wanted to share with you a couple of the feedback that we've been getting, and so those are two. So yes, you can take the assessment. You are part of the familia. If you don't speak Spanish, that is fine. We want you to learn more about your cultural identity, and the assessment is the best place to start, the easiest place to start. And what more than to start with amigos? So thank you. Thank you, Patricia, for that. So we're going to hop right into the topic today about balance. The number one leadership skill of 2025 is balance. When it comes to Latino leadership, it's cultural synergy. And cultural synergy is leadership with depth, presence, and conocimiento, right? Understanding what it's about. We don't have to code switch or leave parts of ourselves behind. It's about integrating all of who we are into how we lead. So Latino leaders often navigate multiple worlds, and we all know this as Latino leaders: family, comunidad, our professional spaces, sometimes without balance. So it's exhausting, as we talked about last week. And this can be very heavy, feel very heavy. But when there's balance, the tension then decreases, right? And it becomes strength for somebody. It allows us to think before we speak. It allows us to understand exactly what the situation is before we react. And so it does matter in today's workforce, that balance, especially cultural synergy, which the assessment shares with you in your report, is the number one leadership skill right now. Organizations, as we all know, are facing rapid changes. There's a lot of diversity that is now beginning to approach in a way like no other time right now in our country. Global complexity is also happening. So leaders need to know how to bridge cultures, not just their own personal culture, but cultures between cultures. So cultural synergy is no longer an option for Latino leaders. This is a must-have requirement for the leadership. I know you feel the same way, Patricia. Share with us what your thoughts.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to put into like some practical terms, right? Like it may be like all big words, big concepts, but when you're balancing that, when you find that synergy, you're not burning up extra energy pretending to
Mm-hmm.
be someone that you're not, right? When we're masking, when we're watching, when we're not being who we are, it does take up a lot of time, and then that just is taking up the energy that you perhaps could be using somewhere else. Uh, when you show up with synergy, authentically who you are, you become more of a trusted leader because now you can really show up authentically, and we know that showing up authentically doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want whenever we want, but now you have that the self understanding, and I think it gives you the confidence to really be a leader, and that then folks probably feel more connected with you, and then you are leading with both relational intelligence of our roots and a strategic clarity for that you have. So it's both, right? It's not one or the other. So it's really important to have the synergy. In other words, balance doesn't dilute your leadership, it kind of amplifies it, right? If you now have that consciousness, that awareness that you are synergized, you're amplifying your leadership.
Yeah, for sure. I want to give also an example. In our community, we always say, we've said this before, échale ganas, right? Ponte las pilas. Like there's these extremes of how we must work hard and give everything of ourselves to what we're doing. And we're all for that. But there is an opportunity now more than ever, and our younger generation is teaching us the impact of work-life balance, the impact of just balance, right? I work with a younger Gen Zer, and it's funny how she works, Patricia, because she's like, okay, we're going to work an hour or two, and then we're going to go get Starbucks. And I'm like, Starbucks? Like, I need to work. I'm not going to just like, get up off my desk and walk away. But for this younger generation, working and pausing for a break, or even if it's a walk or whatever, or Starbucks, is something that they already understand. And so it was a little hard for me to actually leave my desk and go get a break. But this concept of balance has actually helped me say regenerate, come back to my what I was doing and continue focusing. And so I know we're told échale ganas and we're told si se puede, and those are all amazing, but we might want to pause a little bit and say, pues le voy a echar ganas, and I'm going to take a quick break or a 5-minute walk, or just go say hi to somebody and then come back. But again, don't go walking for the whole day, right?
Yeah.
It's a balance.
Yeah.
And so the concept of balance is the number one skill right now. And it went there, we're grounded on conversations around balance. And the reason that it is your own balance is when they are cultural scripts, which is what we've called and we've identified scripts such as familismo, personalismo, respeto, marinismo, machismo. These are the scripts, the assessment measures. When they're scripts, they are just automatic values, behaviors, expectations that show up in your behavior. It is when they become cultural drivers that now they can be balanced and you control what those scripts look like for you. So you can amplify them or you can minimize them. It's kind of like I like to say it's kind of like now we can dance salsa for sure because we can move in whichever way we want. Nobody's telling us move this way. Now, si se puede. Now, don't, code switch, right? It's just a very nice dance that we are in control of. So it's helping us push through. It's helping us understand that there is balance when we show up. And leaders who thrives are those that can notice, right? We talked about the notice, name it and navigate it. That can notice the script, name it. Oh, that's familismo. I'm really maximizing my familismo. And then navigate it. I really need to minimize it, right? I need to be more simpatia because my team has whatever needs more support. And so now it is yours. It's your cultural driver.
Yeah. So, like a few examples, using the cultural scripts and then becoming cultural driver. For example, familismo. It feels loyalty and community, right? But without balance, it can lead to overextending yourself. In other words, you
Mhm.
you you can now spend too much time taking care of the team. You can spend too much time trying to find collective agreements. You may be checking in too much with your family or others to make decisions based on your career. Respeto. It creates dignity and order for us. But in some settings, it can be keep leaders from speaking up. Generationally, it can be, a barrier that for communication, specifically if you're working in all Latino teams, that could be part of that. And so, without balancing, right? Without that, am I noticing? Do I have that awareness? How am I navigating it? Simpatia builds warmth and harmony, right? And it makes us be pleasant and friendly. But sometimes, if it's not balanced, we can be seen as the pushover. We can be seen as someone that's afraid to have the hard conversation at work. And so it's about that synergizing it. And that takes conscious effort.
It
That's when it
does.
becomes the driver. That's when we can talk about being able to name it. And name it is more than just giving it a name. Naming it is just that understanding of what that is, right? And then we can now we can notice it, we can name it, and then we can navigate it, right? And the navigation is what leads to the synergy.
Yeah, well, I was on a podcast this weekend with our partners, and so there are military partners that we partnered with since last year. And one of the board members, all the board members took the assessment, but this year, one of them said, I saw my results and I wanted to look at them, but I didn't, right? Because she was also afraid of what was going to come out. And she says, but when I looked at it, I really couldn't. It was exactly true. Like she noticed that she maximizes in her Marianismo. So she uses that script probably a little too much that it pulls her away from that balanced, synergized area. And although she knew that, like she knew that looking in the mirror, right? As we look ourselves in the mirror as leaders, it was hard to accept. But we were giving her coaching and strategies of how to be more balanced. She talked about some examples that pulls her sometimes to be more Marianista. And it was really interesting to see like the aha moments when it's like, oh, I can be here in balance. I can be a balanced leader when I show up with my Marianismo in the workplace. And so it was really interesting to see that. And that's the beauty of the cultural drivers profile assessment, that it's not about putting you in a box. Nobody that takes this assessment, it's not about us wanting to put you in a box, but it's about shining a light on the patterns that show up for you as a leader. And sometimes that's hard for us as leaders to have something tell us you're too much of this or you're not enough of this. And that is not the main reason. That is, we hope that not everybody feels that way. We hope you enter into the report with the idea that you're going to get balanced strategies and dialogue to bring you to a place where you don't have to compromise who you are and you also can show up authentically. And so it helps lead con cultura and conocimiento.
Mm-hmm.
Conciencia. I said it right. Conciencia. That for some reason that word is hard for me to say. Conciencia. Excuse me.
Yeah, cultura y conciencia, with your skills and with your soul, right?
My
And then
Spanglish kicks in a little bit sometimes. Sorry.
it's okay. It's fine. Don't even get me started in spelling in Spanish. Anyway, so we sometimes think of, well, how does that become in leadership in practice, right? This cultural synergy. And one of the things we're talking about is innovation right now. Everybody's talking about innovation and how do we innovate? How do we do that? And one of the things that Latino leaders are poised to do and really to excel at is both bringing their bicultural and multicultural perspectives that allow them to see possibilities, right? We already know there's a lot of research out there about individuals who speak more than one language, how broad their vocabularies are, but also it's just the way that your brain works. But it can shift in a manner that allows you to see things from different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
and that linguistic capacity turns into navigation. So that is one way. Another way is just that multicultural understanding. When we talk about Latinos being part of the understanding others, the diversity that we bring to the table.
Yeah.
This cultural synergy helps us be really good at inclusion, right? We know what it feels like to be the other, and therefore we also want to bring everybody into the table, the welcoming community. We're really good about bridging across differences, and then once you start to have that understanding of who you are, where your cultural identity comes from, it makes it really easier for you to understand others, and that's validated through the intercultural development inventory that says when you can see yourself and others can, and you can see how others see you, you are more likely to be able to be accepted and adapt to other cultures. And then sustainability, and that by that I mean sustaining an authentic way of behaving and acting, so it leads to less of a burnout, because now you understand completely when and where to bring in that part of your Latinidad, how to manage it in places and spaces, because it may not always be welcome, right? And in other places, depending who we're with, you might need to do more about that. So it's really important in today's environment, where leaders are called to do more than manage people,
Mhm.
that they're called to inspire, to unite, to adapt, that you have this awareness of your how does your cultural identity, when it's synergized, can be used as the superpower, and we talk about that all the time, that sets Latino leaders to be the at our best.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the topics of innovation, inclusion, and sustainability, because those right there are important business imperative topics that I know CEOs around the our country are thinking about. How do we be more innovative right now with the situation that's happening? How can we ensure that we stay inclusive so that people don't leave our organization, right? How do we make sure that we're in sustainability mode where we're sustaining our products, our processes, our people, our customers? Those are important business imperative terms that naturally Latino leaders can automatically know you bring to the table. We don't have to pretend to know what those are. When you are synergized in your Latinidad, in your cultural identity, even in your full picture of your leadership identity, when it is balanced, those naturally will show up. So there was another example that we gave during the podcast this weekend, the concept of listening, because we asked, well, what are the biggest, leadership skills that a leader should have in today's workforce, other than balance, as we're saying, was listening, right? And so I said, okay, let's take listening and balance. When you are minimizing listening, what does that look like in a leader's behavior? I don't know, Patricia, I'll ask you that. What does that look like when you minimize listening? What does that look like for a leader?
When dismissiveness, you know what I mean? You feel like you're not being heard, lose psychological safety in the workplace, trust not likely to be congealing as a good functioning team.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's minimizing the skill set of listening. Now, when we overextend it, what might that look like?
You spend too much time talking and not enough action. I would say that.
Exactly. You spend too
And
much talking and you don't let your employee, who maybe you're having a performance review with, talk. And so it's an overextension of listening. But again, when we use and understand what balanced listening looks like, that's when it is a synergized leadership skill set. So it's the same thing for our culture. When we use our cultural insight at a balanced, synergized lens, then that's when it's a superpower for the Latino leader. So I hope that gave a little bit of example
mhm.
of that, because we talked about how this concept of balance is the number one skill set. And like you said, for Latinos in your Latinidad, the way to get balance is one, understanding your raíces, your roots, right? These are these values that we're talking about, these scripts that we bring up in the assessment. What are those? What are they named? What do they mean? How do they look like for me and in my lived experience? And then razón, the reasoning. What is our strategy? What is our decision making ability as Latino leaders? We do not have to stay in one place. We can move across the continuum as we see fit. Ahora sí se puede bailar as a Latino leader, right? We don't have to just kind of do the step by step countryside side step. No, now enjoy it. But you need to understand what this balance part means.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to watch our time, but,
Yes.
we'd like to give you about three practical takeaways that you may encourage yourself to begin with. for the one we talk about every week is that self-awareness, and in this case we're talking
Mhm.
about cultural self-awareness. When your cultural drivers are showing up in your decisions or interactions, awareness is your first step, right? And not to mention the fact that there's a tool out there, that assessment now, but it's just that it'll become a practice, one that that is there. The second one is adaptability. Talk about not being able to pronounce words this morning.
Adaptability.
Adaptability. Thank you, Patty. Learn to flex your style depending on your context, without losing your core, your raíces, right? And we know we had to adapt. We know we talk about that in the Latino community when we all get together, like we act this way with this group of people, this way with others, and depending on settings, organizations that we go
Mhm.
to. But is the flexibility is not it's not about assimilation, it's about intentionality, right? It's about
Mhm.
that intentionality that still allows you to have that integration. You're still allowed to bring a little bit of yourself in there, your Latinidad in there, but you now are aware how to you're able to navigate it, right? And then the integration, making your bicultural and multicultural perspectives visible to others so they can learn from it and benefit from it. Um, that visibility changes cultures, not just individuals, and it actually those of us that are at the table, and by that I mean if you're sitting in a boardroom, in a classroom, in a position of power, especially now more than ever, it
Mhm.
allows us to change the narrative not only for ourselves as leaders, but for our community, right? For the generation to come. Everything I always do is like, mijo, venga, venga, like for the generation to come. So I think it's really important to be able to offer that integration of bringing our culture, bringing our Latinidad to work.
Yes. And we're going to continue talking about this concept of self awareness because it starts with you. So invest in yourself, invest in this assessment. It's a small price, but it's a price that you will now have to grow in your leadership. The adaptability, but there's some people, some of our colleagues have said, well, I feel fake, or she seems real fake whenever she's, with one group and then with another. I say that's adaptability, the
Mhm.
ability to, be adaptable in one group and then adaptable in others. And so maybe try it out a little bit, and instead of focusing on what others are doing, try to see what it works for yourself. And the integration part, that's all of what we're talking about here today: balance and integration as a leader in today's workforce in 2025. And so that's exactly what the Cultural Drivers Profile Assessment does for our Latino workers and workforce. Even if you're not a leader, you could still take the assessment. So there's a QR code here at the corner. Please feel free to take a picture. That's where you can start your assessment journey there. There's information and videos for you to start understanding, and even understanding what we're talking about as we go through these LinkedIn lives. So what we've seen is that when leaders do this work with them, with themselves, with us, with others, they stop questioning whether they belong in certain spaces. They just show up because that's what they do. And they start owning the fact that their leadership is stronger because of their culture, not in spite of it. So join us on this journey in learning about your Latinidad in our Cultural Drivers Profile Assessment. Last words, Patricia, because our time has now run out.
Yeah. So, we're talking once again, we'll mention a little bit today is not, it's not about having to choose. It's about having a balance in our career. It's about integration. It's about leading with the center of who you are, both with raíces and razón, right? Remember that. That's when our Latino leadership is the most powerful and transformative. Next week, next Wednesday is Latina Equal Pay Day. So we're
Yes.
going to be posting some stuff on LinkedIn about that. Support that. Think about that, what that means for Latinas. And then we'll have a special guest joining us next week. We're doing all of this during Hispanic Heritage Month. Every week we've been trying to put one of these LinkedIn lives together. So hopefully we have been providing you some nuggets of information, unas perlitas, unas pepitas de oro to add to your toolbox as Latinidad. But yeah, so thank you for joining us this morning.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We also are starting registration for a masterclass. So if you want to join one of our Cultural Drivers masterclass, that masterclass will start on October 22nd. So you'll also start seeing information posted around that. It's a 5-week masterclass. It's excellent, amazing experience. Thank you, Patricia, always for joining me on this journey. Everybody have a wonderful week. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Keep celebrating our Latinidad. It is definitely one of the strongest things that we have to bring to the world. So, mil gracias. Have a great day.
Buenos días.